The evening air was cool and pleasant as Marcus Mitchell pulled his car into the parking lot of Riverside Bistro. He turned off the engine and looked at his family with a warm smile. His wife Jennifer sat beside him, checking her lipstick in the mirror. In the back seat, their daughter Ayanna was scrolling through her phone, while their son Malik pressed his face against the window, watching people walk into the fancy restaurant. "This place looks expensive." "Dad?" Malik said, his eyes wide with excitement. Marcus chuckled. "Your sister earned it. Straight A's all year in that science award? That deserves a celebration." Ayanna looked up from her phone and smiled. At 16, she worked hard in school and dreamed of becoming an engineer one day. The Academic Achievement Award she received last week made her parents incredibly proud. Tonight was special. The Mitchell family rarely ate at expensive restaurants, but this occasion called for something memorable. Jennifer squeezed her husband's hand. "Let's go enjoy ourselves. We deserve this." They walked across the parking lot together. Marcus wore his best suit, the navy blue one he saved for important occasions. Jennifer had on a beautiful dress she bought months ago but never had a chance to wear. Ayanna wore a nice blouse and skirt, and Malik had on dress pants and a button-up shirt. He kept tugging at his collar because he was not used to formal clothes. The entrance to Riverside Bistro was elegant. Large glass doors opened into a softly lit dining room. The smell of grilled steak and fresh bread filled the air. A young hostess greeted them with a professional smile. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Mitchell. Party of 4 at 7 o'clock, Marcus said politely. The hostess checked her computer screen and nodded. "Right this way, please." She led them through the restaurant. The dining room was beautiful with white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and fresh flowers on every table. Soft music played in the background. About half the tables were filled with other diners enjoying their meals. As they walked to their table, Marcus noticed a few people looking up at them. He told himself it was nothing. People always looked when someone new walked through a restaurant. But Jennifer noticed it too. She felt the eyes following them and held her purse a little tighter. The hostess seated them at a nice table near the window. "Your server will be right with you. Enjoy your evening." "Thank you," Jennifer said, helping Malik with his chair. They settled in and picked up their menus. The prices made Marcus's eyes widen slightly, but he kept his expression calm. Tonight was about Ayanna, and he would not let money worries show. "Can I get the steak?" Malik asked eagerly. "You can get whatever you want, buddy," Marcus replied. At a table about 20 feet away, Officer Derek Thornton was having dinner with his wife Linda. Thornton had been a police officer for 15 years. He was a large man with short gray hair and a permanent scowl on his face. Even out of uniform, he carried himself like a cop, his eyes constantly scanning the room. Linda was talking about her day at work, but Thornton was not really listening. His attention had shifted to the Mitchell family the moment they walked in. He watched them sit down. He watched them open their menus. He watched Malik fidget in his seat. "Derek, are you listening to me?" Linda asked, annoyed. "Yeah, honey. Your coworker, right? What's wrong? You keep staring over there." Thornton leaned closer to his wife and lowered his voice. "That family. They don't belong here." Linda glanced over at the Mitchells. "What do you mean?" "They're just having dinner. Look at them. Something's off. That kid keeps moving around. They look nervous." "Derek, please. Not tonight. Can't we just have a nice dinner?" But Thornton could not let it go. Years of police work had taught him to trust his instincts, or so he told himself. In reality, his instincts were heavily colored by prejudice he refused to acknowledge. Back at their table, the Mitchells were having a good time. A waiter named James had come to take their drink order. He was friendly and professional, treating them with the same courtesy as any other guest. "I'll have the iced tea," Jennifer said. "Same for me," Marcus added. "Can I get a soda?" Malik asked hopefully. "Sure, but just one," Jennifer said with a smile. Ayanna ordered lemonade, and James wrote everything down before heading to the kitchen. "This place is really nice," Ayanna said, looking around. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom." "You earned it, sweetheart," Marcus said proudly. Malik was playing with his napkin, folding it into different shapes. He was 12 and full of energy. Sitting still at a fancy restaurant was hard for him, but he was trying his best. At the next table, an older white couple noticed the Mitchell family. The woman whispered something to her husband. He looked over, frowned, and then signaled to the hostess. When she came over, he spoke quietly to her. The hostess nodded and led the couple to a different table on the other side of the restaurant. Jennifer saw this happen. Her stomach tightened. She had experienced moments like this before. The sudden table change, the uncomfortable stares, the feeling of being unwelcome in a space that was supposed to be for everyone. "You okay?" Marcus asked, noticing her expression. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice was tight. Marcus followed her gaze and understood immediately. He had seen it too. But he did not want to ruin the evening. They had every right to be here. They had a reservation. They were dressed appropriately. They were behaving well. He would not let ignorant people take this moment away from his family. James returned with their drinks. "Here we are. Have you had a chance to look at the menu?" They ordered their food. Marcus got the grilled salmon. Jennifer chose the chicken with vegetables. Ayanna ordered pasta with shrimp. And Malik, as excited as could be, got his steak with mashed potatoes. "Excellent choices," James said. "Your food will be out shortly." As they waited, they talked about Ayanna's plans for college. She wanted to study at a good engineering school. Marcus and Jennifer were already thinking about how to pay for it, but they did not mention those worries tonight. Tonight was about celebrating. Malik was telling a funny story about his friend at school when it happened. He was gesturing with his hands, acting out what his friend had done, and his elbow knocked into his water glass. Water spilled across the table, soaking his napkin and dripping onto the floor. "Oh no," Malik gasped, his face going red with embarrassment. "It's okay, buddy. Accidents happen," Marcus said quickly, grabbing napkins to help clean up. Jennifer flagged down James, who rushed over with a towel. "No worries at all. Let me get this cleaned up for you." Within a minute, James had mopped up the water and brought a fresh glass for Malik. "There we go. Good as new." "I'm really sorry," Malik said quietly. "Hey, you should see what I spill when I'm working back there in the kitchen," James said with a wink, making Malik smile. But across the room, Officer Thornton had been watching the whole thing. In his mind, the spilled water confirmed his suspicions. These people were trouble. They did not know how to behave in a nice place like this. Someone needed to do something before the situation got worse. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and stood up. "Derek, what are you doing?" Linda asked nervously. "Just going to check on something. I'll be right back." "Please don't," Linda begged, but he was already walking away. Thornton crossed the dining room with heavy footsteps. His jaw was set and his eyes were fixed on the Mitchell family. Other diners noticed him walking with purpose and watched to see what would happen. Marcus saw him coming first. A large white man in casual clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of someone in law enforcement. Marcus had developed a sixth sense for these things over the years. He straightened in his chair and prepared himself. Thornton stopped at their table. He looked down at them with hard eyes and crossed his arms over his chest. "Evening, folks," he said, but his tone was not friendly. "I couldn't help but notice you seem to be having some trouble over here." Marcus kept his voice calm and polite. "No trouble at all, sir. Just a small accident with some water. It's already cleaned up." "Uh-huh." Thornton looked at each family member slowly. "This is a nice establishment. People come here to have a quiet, peaceful dinner." "That's exactly what we're doing," Jennifer said, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "Is it?" Thornton's eyes narrowed. "Because I've been watching you since you walked in. You folks have a reservation here?" The question hung in the air like an insult. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he remained calm. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened his email and showed Thornton the reservation confirmation. "Right here. Mitchell, party of 4, 7 o'clock?" Thornton barely glanced at the phone. "Anyone can make a reservation." "And we made one," Marcus said firmly. "We're customers here just like everyone else." Ayanna shrank in her seat, wishing she could disappear. This was supposed to be her special night. Malik looked confused and scared, not understanding why this man was bothering his family. Thornton leaned down slightly, lowering his voice but keeping it loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I'm a police officer. I've been doing this job for 15 years and I know when something's not right. You're making other guests uncomfortable." "We haven't done anything," Jennifer said, her hands shaking slightly with anger and fear. "We're just sitting here having dinner." "The kid spilled water all over the table," Thornton said accusingly, pointing at Malik. "It was an accident," Marcus said, his patience wearing thin. "The waiter cleaned it up. It's done. Look." Thornton said, straightening up and speaking louder now. I'm going to need you to cooperate. Where's the manager? I think we need to have a conversation about this situation. Marcus could feel every eye in the restaurant on them now. His heart was pounding. His children were frightened. His wife was fighting back tears of humiliation. And this man, this officer who was supposed to protect and serve, was turning their celebration into a nightmare. There's no situation, Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. We have every right to be here. Thornton's face reddened. He was not used to being challenged. He looked around the restaurant and spotted Tim Bradley, the young restaurant manager, near the kitchen entrance. Manager, Thornton called out loudly. I need you over here right now. We've got a problem. Tim Bradley's face went pale. He was only 26 years old and had been managing Riverside Bistro for less than a year. The last thing he wanted was a scene in the middle of dinner service. He hurried over, his heart racing. Is everything all right? He asked nervously. No, everything is not all right, Thornton said firmly. I'm Officer Derek Thornton, and this family is disrupting the other guests. I think you need to handle this situation before it gets worse. Marcus stood up slowly, his hands spread to show he was not threatening anyone. Sir, I'm asking you to please leave us alone. We've done nothing wrong. We're trying to have dinner with our children. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations ended. Everyone was watching the Mitchell family's humiliation unfold. Tim Bradley stood between Officer Thornton and the Mitchell family, feeling completely overwhelmed. He was a young manager who wanted everyone to be happy. Conflict made him nervous, and having a police officer involved made everything 10 times worse. Officer, can you explain what the problem is? Tim asked, his voice shaking slightly. Thornton crossed his arms and spoke with authority. These people have been causing a disturbance since they arrived. Other guests have complained. That kid knocked over a glass of water and made a mess. They don't seem to understand the kind of establishment this is. That's not true, Jennifer said, her voice firm but strained. Our son accidentally spilled water. The waiter cleaned it immediately. We haven't disturbed anyone. Tim looked at the Mitchell family. They were well-dressed and polite. The table was clean. He did not see any evidence of a disturbance. But Officer Thornton was standing there with complete confidence, using words like complaints and disturbance, and Tim felt the weight of authority pressing down on him. Did someone actually complain? Marcus asked Tim directly. Can you tell us who complained and what we supposedly did? Tim shifted uncomfortably. Well, I didn't personally receive any complaints, but I'm telling you there's a problem, Thornton interrupted. I'm a paying customer here, and I'm also a police officer. I know a disturbance when I see one. These people are making other guests uncomfortable with their behavior. What behavior? Marcus demanded, his frustration growing. Sitting at a table? Ordering food? Existing? Ayana grabbed her father's hand under the table. Dad, please, she whispered. She was crying now, tears running down her face. This was supposed to be her special night. Instead, she felt like everyone in the restaurant was staring at her family like they were criminals. Malik did not understand what was happening. He knew his father was upset. He knew his mother was scared. And he knew somehow his spilled water had started all of this. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to spill it. Jennifer put her arm around her son. You did nothing wrong, baby. Nothing at all. Officer Thornton looked at Tim Bradley expectantly. He was used to people following his lead, especially when he mentioned his badge. In his mind, he was doing the right thing. He was maintaining order. He was protecting the other guests from what he saw as suspicious, out-of-place people who did not belong in a nice restaurant. Tim felt trapped. On one hand, the Mitchell family had done nothing wrong that he could see. On the other hand, a police officer was standing there telling him there was a problem. What if he was wrong? What if there really was an issue he did not understand? What if other guests really were uncomfortable, and he just had not heard about it yet? I need to think about what's best for all our guests, Tim said weakly. What's best is for us to eat the dinner we paid for, Marcus said firmly. We made a reservation. We ordered food. We've been nothing but respectful. You have no legal reason to ask us to leave. Thornton stepped closer to Tim and lowered his voice, but not enough that the Mitchell family could not hear. Listen, I've been a cop for 15 years. I know when something's off. These people are acting suspicious. That kid is fidgeting constantly. They keep looking around nervously. I'm telling you, for the safety and comfort of your other guests, you should ask them to leave. Before this turns into a real situation, Marcus could not believe what he was hearing. His son was fidgeting because he was 12 years old sitting at a fancy dinner. His family was looking around nervously because a police officer was harassing them for no reason. Every innocent action was being twisted into evidence of wrongdoing. Several other diners were watching closely now. Some looked uncomfortable with what they were seeing. A few nodded in agreement with Thornton. Others whispered to their companions, unsure what to think. An elderly black couple at a corner table watched with sad, knowing eyes. They had lived through worse. They recognized exactly what was happening. The man squeezed his wife's hand and shook his head slowly. Tim looked at the Mitchell family. He saw Ayanna crying. He saw Malik looking scared and confused. He saw Jennifer holding her children protectively. And he saw Marcus standing there with dignity despite the humiliation being forced upon him. But Tim also saw Officer Thornton's badge. He saw the authority. He felt the pressure, and he made a terrible decision. I'm very sorry, Tim said quietly, not meeting Marcus's eyes. But I think it would be best if you folks left. I'll make sure you're not charged for the drinks. The words hit like a physical blow. Jennifer gasped. Ayanna sobbed. Malik looked at his father with wide, frightened eyes. You're asking us to leave? Marcus said slowly, making sure he understood correctly. We have a reservation. We've done nothing wrong, and you're asking us to leave? I'm just trying to avoid any further problems, Tim said, still not looking at them. There wouldn't be any problems if this officer would leave us alone, Jennifer said, her voice breaking with emotion. Thornton shook his head. You see? Right there. That attitude. That's exactly what I'm talking about. No respect for authority. Respect is earned, Marcus said coldly, and you haven't earned anything but contempt. Are you threatening a police officer? Thornton's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, where his gun would be if he were in uniform. He's not threatening anyone. Jennifer stood up quickly. We're leaving. We're leaving right now. This is insane. Tim looked relieved. Thank you for understanding. Again, I'm very sorry. No, you're not, Marcus said bitterly. If you were sorry, you wouldn't be doing this. He pulled out his wallet and threw two $20 bills on the table. That's for the drinks and the waiter's trouble. We pay our way. Sir, that's not necessary, Tim started to say. Yes, it is, Marcus cut him off. Because we're not the kind of people who walk out on a bill, even when we're being treated like criminals for no reason. Jennifer helped Malik out of his chair. The boy was trying not to cry, but tears were streaming down his face. Ayanna gathered her jacket and purse, keeping her eyes down, unable to look at anyone in the restaurant. As they prepared to leave, Marcus looked directly at Officer Thornton. I want your name and badge number. You already know my name. Badge number is 2847, Thornton said confidently, and you can file whatever complaint you want. I was protecting the other customers. I did my job. Your job is to serve and protect, Marcus said, not to harass innocent families. I'll decide who's innocent and who's not, Thornton replied. Marcus turned to Tim Bradley. I want to speak to the owner of this restaurant. Tim shifted nervously. The owner isn't here right now, but you can call during business hours tomorrow if you want to discuss this. Oh, I'll be discussing this, Marcus promised. You can count on that. Jennifer took Marcus's arm. Let's just go, please. The kids have been through enough. Marcus looked at his family. His daughter was crying. His son looked traumatized. His wife was shaking with anger and hurt. He wanted to fight. He wanted to argue. He wanted to demand justice right here and right now, but his children needed him to get them out of this hostile place. Okay, he said quietly. Let's go. They walked toward the exit with as much dignity as they could manage. Every step felt like a walk of shame. Every eye in the restaurant was on them. Some people looked sympathetic. Others looked satisfied that the problem was being solved. Most just looked uncomfortable, glad it was not happening to them. Near the door, James the waiter caught up with them. I'm so sorry, he whispered urgently. This isn't right. I know this isn't right. Thank you, Jennifer said softly. As they passed Officer Thornton's table, his wife Linda looked mortified. She tried to say something, but Thornton put his hand on her arm, silencing her. The cool evening air hit them as they stepped outside. For a moment, they all just stood there in the parking lot. Nobody spoke. The sounds of the city around them seemed distant and unreal. Then Malik broke down. He buried his face in his mother's dress and sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I spilled the water. This is all my fault." "No, baby, no," Jennifer said, tears streaming down her own face. She knelt down and held her son tightly. "This is not your fault. You did nothing wrong. None of us did anything wrong." Ayana leaned against her father, crying into his shoulder. "I hate them. I hate all of them." Marcus wrapped his arms around his daughter. His own eyes were burning with unshed tears. He felt like he had failed his family. He should have protected them. He should have found a way to make this not happen. "I should have done more," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Jennifer stood up, still holding Malik's hand, and looked at her husband. "You did everything right, everything. This is not on you. This is on them. On their racism. On their cowardice. On their cruelty." "That cop," Marcus said angrily. "He targeted us the moment we walked in." You could see it in his eyes. He was looking for any excuse. "And that manager," Jennifer added. "He knew we didn't do anything wrong, but he was too weak to stand up for what was right." They stood in the parking lot for several more minutes, trying to collect themselves. Other people walked past them into the restaurant, dressed up for their own special dinners. Those people would get to eat their meals in peace. They would not be questioned. They would not be watched. They would not be asked to leave. "What do we do now?" Ayana asked, wiping her eyes. Marcus took a deep breath. "Now we go home. We order pizza. And tomorrow I make phone calls. I file complaints. I contact a lawyer if I have to. I find out who owns this restaurant and I make sure they know what happened here tonight." "Will anything actually happen?" Ayana asked bitterly. "Or will they just protect their own like they always do?" Marcus looked at his daughter. She was 16 years old and already learning the harsh lessons about how the world treated people who looked like them. He wished he could protect her from this reality. But he could not. All he could do was teach her how to stand up for herself. "I don't know if anything will happen," he said honestly, "but we have to try. We have to speak up. Because if we don't, nothing will ever change." They got in the car. The drive home was quiet except for Malik's occasional sniffles. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind racing with anger and plans for what to do next. Jennifer stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. She was thinking about all the other times in her life when she had been made to feel unwelcome. The stores where she was followed. The job interviews where she was treated differently. The 1,000 small cuts of racism that added up to a deep wound. When they got home, Marcus called their favorite pizza place. While they waited for the delivery, the family sat together in the living room. Nobody felt much like talking. Finally, Ayana spoke up. "Dad, are you going to give up on this?" Marcus looked at his daughter with fierce determination. "No, absolutely not. What happened tonight was wrong, and I'm going to make sure people know about it." "Good," Ayana said, "because I don't want anyone else to go through what we just went through." Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug. Despite everything, he felt a surge of pride. His children had witnessed something terrible tonight, but they were learning to stand up for themselves. They were learning that silence in the face of injustice was not acceptable. The pizza arrived. They ate together, trying to salvage something of their celebration. Marcus toasted Ayana with his soda can. "To my brilliant daughter, who deserved so much better than what happened tonight." "To Ayana," Jennifer and Malik echoed, raising their own cans. It was not the celebration they had planned. But they were together. They were supporting each other. And tomorrow, Marcus would start fighting back. Back at Riverside Bistro, Officer Thornton finished his meal, satisfied that he had handled a potential problem. He paid his bill and left with his wife, who barely spoke to him on the drive home. Tim Bradley cleaned up the Mitchell family's table, feeling uneasy about what had happened but telling himself he had made the right call. He had avoided a scene, right? He had listened to a police officer. He had done what was necessary, but deep down, he knew he had failed. He knew he had let a family be humiliated for no good reason. And as he wiped down their table, he found Ayana's academic achievement certificate that had fallen on the floor. He picked it up and read her name, feeling a pang of guilt that would keep him awake that night. In his office at home, Marcus sat at his computer, drafting emails and preparing to make calls. He would not let this go. He would not let his family's humiliation mean nothing. And outside in his car, someone neither Marcus nor Officer Thornton knew about yet sat watching the restaurant. David Richardson had been driving by when he noticed something that caught his attention. As the owner of Riverside Bistro and 2 other restaurants in the city, he often checked in on his businesses unannounced. He had seen the Mitchell family being escorted out. He had seen their faces. He had seen Officer Thornton's satisfied expression as he returned to his meal. Richardson knew that look. He had seen it many times in his 58 years, and he decided in that moment that he would be paying a visit to his restaurant very soon. Things were about to change. The Mitchell family reached the glass doors of Riverside Bistro, Marcus holding them open for his wife and children. Jennifer had her arms around both Ayanna and Malik, trying to shield them from the stares they could still feel burning into their backs. The evening that was supposed to be a celebration had turned into a nightmare they would never forget. Marcus took one last look at the restaurant interior. He memorized the layout, the faces of the people who had watched their humiliation without saying a word, and especially the face of Officer Derek Thornton, who sat back at his table looking satisfied with himself. Marcus burned all of it into his memory. He would not forget. He would not let this go unpunished. Just as they were about to step through the door into the parking lot, the door suddenly swung open from the outside. A well-dressed black man in his late 50s stepped into the restaurant. He wore an expensive charcoal suit with a crisp white shirt and a burgundy tie. His silver-framed glasses caught the light from the restaurant's chandelier. There was something about the way he carried himself that commanded attention without demanding it. The man stopped when he saw the Mitchell family crowded in the doorway. He immediately noticed Ayanna's tear-stained face, Malik's frightened expression, and the tension radiating from Marcus and Jennifer. His experienced eyes took in the scene in an instant, understanding that something was very wrong. "Excuse me," he said politely, stepping aside to let them pass, but then he paused, really looking at them. "Is everything all right?" Marcus hesitated. Part of him wanted to just leave, to get his family away from this place as quickly as possible. But another part of him, the part that was angry and hurt and tired of being treated like he did not belong, wanted to tell someone what had just happened. "No," Marcus said firmly. "Everything is not all right." The man's expression grew serious. "What happened?" Before Marcus could answer, Tim Bradley rushed over, nervous about this new development. "Mr. Richardson, I didn't know you were coming tonight. Is everything okay?" "Mr. Richardson." Marcus filed that name away, but he did not recognize it yet. He assumed this was just another customer, maybe someone important whom the manager wanted to impress. "I was just asking these folks that same question," Richardson said, his eyes never leaving the Mitchell family. "They seem upset." Tim's face went pale. He glanced back at Officer Thornton's table, then at the Mitchell family, then at Richardson. He looked like a man who suddenly realized he might have made a terrible mistake. "It's been handled, sir. Just a small situation that we resolved," Tim said quickly, trying to sound confident. "Handled?" Jennifer's voice was sharp with anger. "Is that what you call it?" Richardson held up his hand gently. "Please, I would very much like to understand what happened here. Would you mind telling me?" There was something about his calm, respectful tone that made Marcus trust him. This man was not rushing them out the door. He was not treating them like they were the problem. He was actually listening. "We had a reservation," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the emotion underneath. "We came here to celebrate our daughter's academic achievement. We were seated, we ordered drinks, and then everything went wrong." "How so?" Richardson asked, giving Marcus his complete attention. Ayanna spoke up, her voice breaking. "My brother accidentally spilled some water. Just water. The waiter cleaned it up right away. It wasn't a big deal. But a police officer over there," Marcus gestured toward Thornton's table, "decided we were causing a disturbance. He came to our table and started questioning us, demanding to see our reservation, telling us we were making other guests uncomfortable. We weren't doing anything," Malik added quietly. "We were just sitting there." Jennifer continued the story, her voice tight with controlled fury. "That officer pressured your manager here to ask us to leave. We have done nothing wrong. We have been nothing but respectful. But we were told to leave because we were supposedly disturbing people." Richardson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He turned to Tim Bradley. "Is this true?" Tim shifted uncomfortably. Officer Thornton expressed concerns about the situation. He's a police officer, so I thought it was best to err on the side of caution. Caution about what? Richardson asked, his tone still calm but with an edge now. What exactly did this family do that required caution? The child spilled water, Tim said weakly. And Officer Thornton said other guests had complained. Who complained? Richardson asked directly. Give me names. Tim's silence was answer enough. There had been no specific complaints, just Thornton's accusations and Tim's willingness to believe them. Richardson turned back to the Mitchell family. I am deeply sorry for what you've experienced here tonight. This is not what this restaurant stands for. This is not what I built this place to be. You built this place? Marcus asked, realization beginning to dawn. David Richardson, the man said, extending his hand. I own Riverside Bistro, the owner. Marcus shook his hand, his mind racing. This was the person he had planned to call tomorrow. This was the person who had the power to do something about what had happened. Officer Thornton noticed the commotion at the door. He saw Richardson talking to the Mitchell family, and his expression shifted from satisfied to concerned. He did not recognize Richardson, but he saw an expensive suit and an air of authority. His police instincts told him this might be a problem. Richardson was still focused on the Mitchell family. Please don't leave yet. I want to understand everything that happened. Every detail. We just want to go home, Jennifer said tiredly. Our children have been through enough humiliation for one night. I understand, Richardson said gently. But I'm asking you to stay just a little longer. Please. Because what happened here tonight is important and it matters that people know the truth. Marcus looked at Jennifer. She looked at their children. Ayanna and Malik both nodded slightly. They were scared and hurt, but they also wanted someone to hear their story. Someone who might actually do something about it. Okay, Marcus agreed. We'll stay. Richardson smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. Thank you. Now let's start from the beginning. Tell me everything. Over the next several minutes, the Mitchell family recounted their entire experience. Marcus told about the stares they received when they first entered. Jennifer described how an older couple had specifically requested to move tables away from them. Ayanna explained about the spilled water and how the waiter had handled it perfectly. Malik talked about how scared he was when the big police officer came over to their table. Richardson listened to every word without interrupting. Tim Bradley stood nearby, looking increasingly uncomfortable as the full story unfolded. Other diners were starting to notice the conversation at the entrance. Some tried to pretend they were not listening while clearly straining to hear every word. When the Mitchell family finished their account, Richardson turned to Tim. And you asked them to leave based on what? Officer Thornton said they were causing a disturbance, Tim repeated, but his voice lacked conviction now. Did you see them cause a disturbance? Richardson pressed no, but did any other guest actually complain to you directly? No, but Officer Thornton said, Officer Thornton, Richardson interrupted, is not the manager here. You are. And you made a decision to remove paying customers who had a reservation and had done nothing wrong. Is that correct? Tim could not look Richardson in the eye. I thought I was preventing a bigger problem. The only problem here, Richardson said quietly, was discrimination. And you enabled it. Officer Thornton had heard enough. He stood up from his table and walked over to the entrance, his wife Linda following reluctantly behind him. She looked embarrassed and kept her eyes down. Is there a problem here? Thornton asked, using his authoritative police voice. Richardson turned to face him. Are you the officer who asked this family to leave? I'm Officer Derek Thornton, badge 2847, Thornton said, standing tall. And yes, I expressed concerns to the manager about a situation developing with these people. I was protecting the other guests. Protecting them from what? Richardson asked calmly. From a family having dinner? They were acting suspiciously, Thornton insisted. The kid was fidgeting, making a mess. They looked nervous and out of place. In my 15 years as a police officer, I've learned to trust my instincts. Your instincts, Richardson repeated slowly. Tell me, officer, what exactly looks suspicious about a well-dressed family sitting quietly at a table waiting for their food? I told you. The behavior, the mess, the attitude, Thornton said defensively. He's 12 years old. Richardson gestured to Malik. 12-year-old boys fidget. That's what they do. She's 16, he pointed to Ayanna, and she was celebrating an academic achievement, and these are her parents, who saved up money to give their children a nice dinner. What part of that is suspicious? Thornton's face reddened. Look, I don't know who you are, but I handled this situation appropriately. I'm the owner of this restaurant, Richardson said quietly, and I'm telling you that you didn't handle anything appropriately. You racially profiled this family and used your badge to intimidate my manager into supporting your prejudice. That's ridiculous, Thornton blustered. This has nothing to do with race. I would have done the same thing regardless of who they were. Would you? Richardson asked pointedly. Have you ever questioned a white family having dinner here? Have you ever asked to see their reservation? Have you ever told the manager that they were making other guests uncomfortable? Thornton's silence spoke volumes. Marcus spoke up. He came to our table with his mind already made up. He wasn't observing suspicious behavior. He decided we were suspicious the moment we walked through that door. That's not true, Thornton protested, but he was losing confidence. Richardson pulled out his cell phone. I'm going to make a call. I think we need to have someone else here to witness this conversation. Who are you calling? Thornton demanded. An old friend, Richardson said simply as he dialed. The phone rang twice before someone answered. Helen, it's David Richardson. I need you at Riverside Bistro right now. We have a situation involving one of your officers. Yes, it's urgent. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Thornton. Chief Santos is on her way. The blood drained from Thornton's face. The police chief was coming. Suddenly, this was not just about a minor incident at a restaurant. This was becoming official. This could affect his job. I don't think that's necessary, Thornton said, his voice losing some of its authority. I disagree, Richardson said firmly. What happened here tonight was wrong on multiple levels, and it needs to be addressed properly. Tim Bradley looked like he wanted to disappear. He had gone from trying to avoid a scene to being at the center of one. And now the police chief was involved. Richardson turned back to the Mitchell family. I know you've been through a lot tonight, and I understand if you just want to leave. But I'm asking you to stay until Chief Santos arrives. Your story needs to be heard. What happened to you should never happen to anyone. Jennifer looked at Marcus. They had a silent conversation with their eyes. Stay and speak up or protect their children from more stress. We'll stay, Marcus decided. But only if you promise that our children won't be traumatized any further. You have my word, Richardson said. In fact, why don't we all sit down? I see no reason to stand here in the doorway. Tim, please seat this family at the best table in the restaurant. Sir? Tim looked confused. You heard me. The best table. And bring them whatever they want to eat and drink. Everything is complimentary, obviously. We don't want charity, Marcus said with dignity. It's not charity, Richardson replied. It's an apology. A completely inadequate apology, but a start nonetheless. Tim led the Mitchell family to a large, beautiful table near the window with a view of the city lights. It was the kind of table usually reserved for special occasions or VIP guests. Other diners watched with confused expressions as the family they had just seen being asked to leave was now being seated at the best spot in the restaurant. Richardson pulled up a chair and sat with them. While we wait for Chief Santos, would you mind telling me about your daughter's achievement? That's what tonight was supposed to be about, after all. Ayanna looked surprised that anyone cared. I got the Science Achievement Award at my school, and I maintained a 4.0 GPA all year. That's wonderful, Richardson said with genuine warmth. What do you want to study? Engineering, Ayanna said softly. I want to design things that help people. That's a noble goal, Richardson replied. The world needs more engineers with that mindset. Officer Thornton remained standing near the entrance, uncertain what to do. His wife Linda tugged at his arm. Derek, let's just go, she whispered urgently, before this gets worse. I haven't done anything wrong, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. You profiled that family, Linda said quietly. You know you did. And now the police chief is coming. Please, let's just leave, but it was too late. The door opened and Police Chief Helen Santos walked in. She was a woman in her mid-50s with short gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore her uniform and carried herself with the authority of someone who had earned her position through decades of hard work. She scanned the restaurant quickly, her eyes landing on Richardson, then on the Mitchell family, and finally on Officer Thornton. Her expression hardened. David, she greeted Richardson warmly, shaking his hand. It's been too long. Helen, thank you for coming so quickly, Richardson said. We have a serious problem here. Santos turned to Officer Thornton. Officer, explain yourself. And just like that, Officer Derek Thornton realized that his night was about to get much worse. His simple act of maintaining order was about to have consequences he had not anticipated. The entire restaurant watched as Chief Santos began asking questions. Marcus held his family close, feeling that finally someone in authority was going to listen to what they had been through. Richardson sat back and observed, his face serious. This was his restaurant, his business, his responsibility, and what had happened here tonight violated everything he had worked to build. The confrontation was just beginning, but the Mitchell family no longer felt alone. They had an ally now, a powerful one, and maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this terrible night. Chief Helen Santos stood in the middle of Riverside Bistro with her arms crossed, looking every bit the commanding officer she was. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork was set down. All eyes were on the unfolding scene. Officer Derek Thornton straightened his shoulders and tried to appear confident, but there was a slight tremor in his hands that he could not quite control. He had not expected the night to turn out this way. He thought he had handled a minor disturbance. Now he was face to face with his boss while the restaurant owner and the family he had ejected watched. Officer Thornton, Chief Santos said in a measured tone that somehow felt more intimidating than shouting. I'm waiting for your explanation. Chief, this is all a misunderstanding, Thornton began. I was having dinner with my wife when I noticed a family acting suspiciously. The child was causing a disturbance. I simply expressed my concerns to the manager, as any responsible citizen would do. Suspiciously. Santos repeated the word slowly. Define what you mean by that. Thornton glanced at the Mitchell family, then back at the chief. They seemed out of place, nervous. The boy was fidgeting constantly and spilled water everywhere. I could see other guests were uncomfortable. Were you in uniform? Santos asked. No, ma'am. I was off duty. But you identified yourself as a police officer? Yes, ma'am. I thought it carried weight. I was trying to help maintain order. Santos turned to Tim Bradley, who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. And you, as the manager, decided to ask these customers to leave based on what this off-duty officer told you? Tim swallowed hard. He's a police officer, Chief Santos. He said there were complaints. He said they were disturbing other guests. I thought I should listen to him. Did anyone else complain to you directly? Santos asked. No, ma'am. Did you witness any actual disturbance? The boy spilled some water. And was it cleaned up? Yes, ma'am. Right away. Our waiter James took care of it immediately. Santos looked around the restaurant. Is James here? I'd like to hear from him. James emerged from near the kitchen, nervous but determined. He was a young man in his 20s with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. I'm James, Chief. You served this family? Yes, ma'am. They were perfect customers. Polite, respectful. The boy accidentally knocked over his water glass, but it was no big deal. I cleaned it up in like 30 seconds. Happens all the time here. Did they seem intoxicated or disruptive in any way? Not at all, James said firmly. They were celebrating their daughter's achievement. They were just a normal, nice family having dinner. Santos nodded and turned back to Thornton. So let me understand this correctly. You saw a black family having dinner? The child accidentally spilled some water, which was immediately cleaned up. And you decided this constituted suspicious behavior, worthy of having them removed from the premises. It wasn't just about the water, Thornton insisted, his face flushing. They looked out of place, uncomfortable, like they didn't belong here. The words hung in the air like poison. Several diners gasped quietly. Even Thornton seemed to realize he had said something revealing. Didn't belong, Richardson repeated quietly from where he sat with the Mitchell family. That's interesting language, officer. David Richardson stood up slowly, his calm demeanor never breaking, but there was steel in his voice now. Let me tell you something about who belongs in this restaurant. I opened Riverside Bistro 20 years ago. Before that, I worked 3 jobs trying to save enough money to start a business. Do you know why I wanted to own a restaurant, Officer Thornton? Thornton said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Richardson continued, his voice steady but powerful. I grew up in Mississippi in the 1960s and 70s. My mother was a maid. My father worked in construction when he could find work. I remember being a child and watching my parents dress up in their best clothes to go to dinner at a nice restaurant for their anniversary. Do you know what happened? The restaurant was silent except for Richardson's voice. They were told they couldn't sit in the main dining room. They were directed to a back room away from the white customers. My father, a proud man who worked his fingers raw to provide for us, had to accept that humiliation because that's just how things were. I watched my mother cry in the car afterward. She cried not because of the segregation itself, but because her children had to witness her being treated as less than human. Jennifer Mitchell reached out and squeezed Richardson's hand. She understood. She knew that pain. Richardson's eyes were bright with emotion, but his voice remained controlled. I vowed that day that if I ever had the means, I would create a place where everyone, regardless of their color, would be treated with dignity and respect. Where families could celebrate special moments without fear. Where children wouldn't have to watch their parents be humiliated. He turned to face Thornton directly. That's what this restaurant represents. That's what I built here. And you, officer, violated everything this place stands for. Thornton's face had gone from red to pale. His wife Linda was crying quietly beside him. Marcus stood up and walked over to stand next to Richardson. My son is 12 years old. He spilled a glass of water. That's all. But because of the color of our skin, that became suspicious activity. Our celebration became a disturbance. Our presence became a problem. Ayana joined her father, her voice shaking but determined. I worked so hard this year. Straight A's, science award. I was so proud. My parents were proud. And then that man, she pointed at Thornton, made us feel like criminals for existing. Malik stood too, still holding his mother's hand. He was the youngest, the most scared, but he found his courage. I didn't mean to spill the water. I said sorry. But the police officer scared me. He made my dad angry and my mom cry and my sister sad. Why did he do that? The simple question from a child cut through everything. Why indeed? Chief Santos walked over to Thornton, her expression hard. Officer Thornton, you have been on the force for 15 years. In that time, have you received any training on implicit bias? Yes, ma'am, Thornton muttered. Have you received training on the appropriate use of your authority when off duty? Yes, ma'am. Then explain to me how you thought it was acceptable to leverage your badge to intimidate a restaurant manager into ejecting a family that had done nothing wrong. I thought I was helping, Thornton said weakly. You thought wrong, Santos said sharply. Your actions tonight constitute an abuse of authority at minimum, and quite possibly a violation of this family's civil rights. Linda Thornton stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she said to the Mitchell family. I told him to stop. I told him to leave you alone. I knew it was wrong, but he wouldn't listen to me. Jennifer looked at the woman with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. Then why didn't you speak up louder? Why didn't you say something to the manager? To anyone? Linda had no answer. She just cried harder. Richardson addressed the entire restaurant, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Let this be a lesson to everyone here tonight. Discrimination isn't just about the person who commits the act. It's also about everyone who watches it happen and says nothing. Every person who saw this family being harassed and looked away shares responsibility for what happened. Some diners looked ashamed. A few got up and walked out, unable to face their complicity. But others remained, listening. An elderly black couple who had been sitting in the corner stood up. The man spoke with a voice weathered by years. We saw what happened. We've lived it ourselves too many times to count. We'll be witnesses if you need them. A middle-aged white woman raised her hand timidly. I saw it too. I thought it was wrong, but I didn't know what to do. I'm sorry. I should have said something. One by one, several diners came forward, either to apologize for their silence or to offer support to the Mitchell family. Not everyone. Some remained silent, still uncomfortable or unwilling to acknowledge what had happened, but enough spoke up to matter. Chief Santos took out a notebook. I'm going to need statements from everyone willing to provide them. This is now an official investigation. She turned to Thornton. Officer, you're suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Turn in your badge and service weapon tomorrow morning at 800 hours. Chief, please. Thornton started. That's an order, officer. And consider yourself lucky that's all I'm doing right now. Tim Bradley approached Richardson nervously. Mr. Richardson, I don't know what to say. I made a terrible mistake. I was wrong. Richardson looked at his young manager for a long moment. Yes, you were. You had a choice between doing what was right and doing what was easy. You chose easy. That's not who I want managing my restaurant. Are you firing me? Tim asked quietly. I should, Richardson said. But I'm going to give you one chance. One. You're going to work with me to make sure nothing like this ever happens here again. You're going to help me develop training for all our staff. You're going to become an advocate for change. If you can't do that, then yes, you're fired. Tim nodded quickly. I'll do it. I promise. I'll make this right. Richardson turned to the Mitchell family. I know words are inadequate right now. Nothing I can say will undo the hurt and humiliation you experienced tonight. But I want you to know that this is not who we are. This is not what this restaurant represents. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows that. Marcus shook Richardson's hand. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing us. You have no idea how rare that is. I do, actually, Richardson said sadly. I know exactly how rare it is. Chief Santos finished taking notes and approached the family. I'll need formal statements from all of you. We'll be pursuing this as a civil rights violation. Officer Thornton will face departmental charges and possibly criminal charges depending on what the investigation reveals. Will anything actually happen? Ayanna asked skeptically. Or is this just going to be swept under the rug like it usually is? Santos looked the 16-year-old in the eye. I can't promise you perfect justice. The system is flawed and I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. But I can promise you that I take this seriously. What happened here tonight is unacceptable and there will be consequences. Jennifer spoke up. What about all the other times this happens? When there's no restaurant owner who cares? When there's no police chief who listens? What about all the families who get kicked out and nobody does anything about it? The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of countless similar incidents that had happened and would continue to happen. Richardson looked thoughtful. That's the real question, isn't it? This incident matters, but it's just one incident. The bigger problem is systemic. It's in how people think.
How they judge.
How they act based on those judgments. He paused, an idea forming. Maybe this doesn't have to be just one incident. Maybe we can use what happened here tonight to start a bigger conversation. To create real change now, Marcus asked. I'm not sure yet, Richardson admitted. But I have some resources. I have a platform. I have connections in the business community. And now I have a story that needs to be told. Give me some time to think about this, Santos added. The department needs reform too. This isn't the first time I've dealt with implicit bias issues. It won't be the last, but maybe we can use this case as a catalyst for better training, better accountability. James the waiter spoke up again. Mr. Richardson, if you're going to do some kind of program or training, I want to help. I want to learn how to be a better ally, how to speak up when I see something wrong. Several other staff members nodded in agreement. Richardson smiled for the first time since arriving. Okay, we'll do this together, all of us. We'll figure out how to make something positive come from something terrible. He turned back to the Mitchell family. But first, tonight is still supposed to be about celebrating Ayanna. So if you're willing, I'd like you to stay and have that dinner you came here for. The chef will prepare whatever you want. Take as long as you like. And I'll sit with you if you'll have me. And we can talk about engineering and science awards in the future instead of the ugliness of what just happened. Malik tugged on his father's sleeve. Can we stay, Dad? I'm actually really hungry now. Despite everything, Marcus laughed. Yeah, buddy. We can stay. The family settled back at their table. Richardson sat with them, and over the next hour they talked and laughed and slowly began to heal from the trauma of the evening. The food was excellent. The company was warm, and for a little while they could focus on the good instead of the bad. Officer Thornton and his wife left quietly, his head down, facing an uncertain future. Tim Bradley watched and learned, understanding that he had been given a second chance he did not deserve, but would work hard to earn. And all around them, the other diners slowly resumed their meals, but with a new awareness. They had witnessed something tonight, something uncomfortable and important. And at least some of them would remember. At least some of them would do better next time. Chief Santos stayed for a while, ensuring everything was documented properly. As she prepared to leave, she stopped by the Mitchell family's table. Thank you for staying. Thank you for speaking up. I know it wasn't easy. Nothing worth doing is easy, Marcus replied. Santos nodded. That's the truth. I'll be in touch soon about the investigation. As she left, Richardson looked at the family with deep respect. You handled tonight with more grace and dignity than most people could manage. Your children are lucky to have parents like you. Jennifer smiled tiredly. We're all just trying to survive in a world that's not always fair. True, Richardson agreed. But survival isn't enough. We also have to fight for something better, for ourselves and for the next generation. He looked at Ayanna. Tell me more about your engineering dreams. What kind of things do you want to build? And as Ayanna began to talk excitedly about her plans, the terrible night slowly transformed into something different, still painful, still unfair, but also full of possibility, full of the promise that speaking up matters, that standing together matters, that change, however slow and difficult, is possible. 3 weeks had passed since that terrible night at Riverside Bistro. In that time, Marcus Mitchell had barely slept. He spent his evenings filling out forms, writing statements, talking to lawyers, and telling their story over and over again. Each time he recounted what happened, he felt the anger and humiliation fresh again. But he kept going. He had made a promise to himself and his family that this would not be forgotten. Jennifer returned to teaching, but found it hard to concentrate. Her students noticed she was distracted. How could she teach them about justice and fairness when her own family had experienced such blatant injustice? But she pushed through because that's what she always did. She was strong for her children, strong for her students, strong for everyone. Sometimes she wondered who would be strong for her. Ayanna went back to school, but everything felt different now. The science award that had once filled her with pride now felt tainted. Some of her classmates had heard about what happened. Some were supportive. Others made uncomfortable jokes or changed the subject quickly. A few white students suddenly seemed nervous around her, as if they were afraid of saying the wrong thing. The casual friendships she once enjoyed felt strained and awkward. Malik had nightmares. He would wake up crying, dreaming about the big police officer standing over their table. Jennifer held him those nights, singing softly until he fell back asleep. He stopped asking to go out to restaurants. When his parents suggested pizza or burgers, he always wanted to order delivery instead. The joy of going out to eat had been stolen from him. But today was different. Today, David Richardson had invited them back to Riverside Bistro, not for dinner this time, but for something he called a community conversation. He had been working behind the scenes, and he wanted the Mitchell family to be part of what he had created. Marcus pulled into the same parking lot where their nightmare began. He felt Jennifer tense beside him. In the back seat, Ayanna stared at the restaurant with mixed emotions. Malik pressed himself against the car door. "Do we have to go in?" Malik asked quietly. Marcus turned around to look at his son. "Yes, buddy, we do. Because Mr. Richardson is trying to make something good come from something bad, and we need to be brave enough to be part of that. What if that police officer is there?" Malik asked, fear in his voice. "He won't be," Jennifer assured him. "Chief Santos promised us he's been suspended. He's not allowed anywhere near here." They got out of the car and walked toward the entrance. Marcus held Jennifer's hand tightly. This time they were not dressed up. They wore casual, comfortable clothes. This was not a celebration. This was something else entirely. Richardson was waiting for them at the door. His face lit up when he saw them. "You came. Thank you. I know this must be difficult." "That's an understatement," Marcus said, but he shook Richardson's hand warmly. Richardson led them inside. The restaurant looked different. Instead of the usual table settings, chairs had been arranged in a large circle. Maybe 50 or 60 people were already there, and more kept arriving. Marcus recognized some faces from that night. The elderly black couple who had offered to be witnesses. James the waiter. Tim Bradley. But there were also many new faces. People from the community. Business owners. Teachers. Students. Representatives from civil rights organizations. Chief Helen Santos was there in uniform, talking quietly with a group of community leaders. When she saw the Mitchell family, she excused herself and came over. "Thank you for coming," she said, shaking each of their hands. "I know being here again can't be easy. Has there been any update on Officer Thornton?" Marcus asked. Santos nodded. "He's still suspended. The internal investigation is ongoing. We found a pattern of behavior that's concerning. This wasn't his first incident, just the first one that got this much attention. He'll likely face disciplinary action at minimum, possibly termination." "And criminal charges?" Jennifer asked. "That's up to the district attorney's office. They're reviewing the case. I've recommended charges for deprivation of rights under color of law. Ayanna spoke up. Even if he's fired, he'll just get hired somewhere else. That's what always happens. Santos looked at the young woman with respect. You're right. That is what often happens, which is why we're working on reforming the disciplinary database to make it harder for problem officers to just move to another department. It's not perfect, but it's progress. As more people arrived, Richardson called everyone to take their seats. The circle was almost complete. Marcus found himself sitting between his wife and a young white man, who introduced himself as a local business owner. Across the circle, he saw Tim Bradley sitting between two women from a racial justice organization. Richardson stood in the center of the circle. Thank you all for coming tonight. I called this gathering because 3 weeks ago, something terrible happened in this restaurant. A family was humiliated and ejected from this establishment because of racial prejudice. That family's here tonight. The Mitchell family has shown incredible courage in not only speaking up about what happened, but in returning here to help us learn and grow from it. He gestured to Marcus, Jennifer, Ayanna, and Malik. Some people applauded. Others nodded respectfully. Malik shrank in his seat, uncomfortable with the attention. Richardson continued. But here's the truth. This isn't really about one incident. This is about a system, a pattern, a way of thinking that allows these incidents to happen over and over again. How many of you have experienced something similar? Several hands went up around the circle. A young black woman, an elderly Latino man, a South Asian teenager, a Native American woman. More than Marcus expected, but also exactly as many as he feared. And how many of you, Richardson continued, have witnessed something like this happen to someone else and didn't speak up? This time, even more hands went up. White hands. Brown hands. Young and old. The honesty in the room was uncomfortable but necessary. That's what we're here to talk about tonight, Richardson said. Not to shame anyone, but to learn, to understand, and to commit to doing better. I've asked the Mitchell family to share their story first, if they're willing, and then we'll open it up to others to share, to ask questions, to figure out how we create real change in our community. Marcus looked at his family. Jennifer squeezed his hand. Ayanna nodded slightly. Even Malik, scared as he was, gave a tiny nod of agreement. Marcus stood up. His legs felt shaky, but his voice was steady. My name is Marcus Mitchell. 3 weeks ago, my family came to this restaurant to celebrate my daughter's academic achievements. We left humiliated, traumatized, and questioning whether we belonged anywhere outside our own home. He told the story, all of it. The stares when they walked in, the couple who moved tables, the spilled water, Officer Thornton's harassment, the manager's complicity, the feeling of being made to feel less than human in front of his children. As he spoke, people listened intently. Some cried quietly. Others looked angry. A few looked ashamed. When Marcus finished, Jennifer spoke. The worst part wasn't what happened to my husband or me. We're adults. We've dealt with racism our whole lives. The worst part was watching it happen to our children, watching my daughter's joy turn to tears, watching my son learn that his very presence could be seen as threatening. That's what I can't forgive. Ayanna was crying now, but she stood anyway. I'm 16 years old. I work hard in school. I follow the rules. I try to be a good person, but none of that mattered that night. The only thing that mattered was the color of my skin. How am I supposed to believe in the system when the system sees me as a problem before I even open my mouth? The circle was silent. Ayanna's question hung in the air like a challenge. Then Malik surprised everyone by standing too. His voice was small and shaky but determined. I'm 12. I just wanted to eat steak with my family, but a police officer scared me. He made my dad angry and my mom sad, and I had bad dreams for 3 weeks. I don't understand why he was mean to us. We didn't do anything bad. Several people were crying openly now. The simple truth from a child cut deeper than any adult explanation could. Richardson thanked them and asked them to sit. Then he opened the floor to others. The elderly black couple spoke about their own experiences through decades of discrimination. A young Muslim woman talked about being followed in stores. A Latino father shared how his son was accused of theft for holding merchandise he intended to buy. Story after story, the weight of systemic racism became impossible to ignore. But then something else happened. White people started speaking up too, not to defend or explain away, but to acknowledge their complicity. A white woman in her 40s stood up. I was here that night. I saw what was happening to the Mitchell family. and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business. I was uncomfortable, but I didn't want to cause a scene. I went home and felt sick about it. I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have stood up for you. Another white man spoke. I own a business 2 blocks from here. I've definitely treated black customers differently without even realizing it. Watched them more closely. Asked for ID when I wouldn't ask white customers. I thought I was being careful, but I was being prejudiced. I'm working to change that, but I needed to acknowledge it first. Tim Bradley stood, his voice trembling. I'm the manager who asked the Mitchell family to leave. I made the worst decision of my career. I let fear and intimidation override my judgment and my values. I hurt this family because I was too weak to stand up for what was right. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm committed to never making that mistake again. Around the circle, the conversation continued. People asked questions. How do we recognize our own biases? How do we speak up when we see injustice? How do we create safe spaces where everyone is truly welcome? How do we hold systems accountable? Chief Santos spoke about the reforms she was implementing in the police department. Mandatory bias training, better accountability systems, community oversight. She admitted the department had failed the Mitchell family and too many others. Change is slow, Santos said, and I know saying that is frustrating when people are being harmed right now. But I'm committed to making sure we're moving in the right direction, even if we're not moving as fast as we should. A representative from a civil rights organization talked about legal resources available to people who experience discrimination. A teacher discussed how to talk to children about race and prejudice. A business owner shared the training program they implemented for their staff. Hours passed. The conversation was difficult, often uncomfortable, sometimes painful. But it was real, it was honest, and it was necessary. As the evening drew to a close, Richardson stood again. Tonight was just the beginning. We've started a conversation that needs to continue. I'm committing Riverside Bistro and my other restaurants to several concrete actions. He outlined his plans. Mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, a diversity and inclusion advisory board, partnership with local civil rights organizations, a scholarship program for students of color pursuing hospitality careers, and a safe space certification program for businesses committed to creating welcoming environments for everyone. I'm also making a personal commitment, Richardson said. 5% of our profits will go to organizations fighting for racial justice. And I'm challenging every business owner in this community to join me. Several business owners stood to pledge their participation. Richardson turned to the Mitchell family. None of this brings back your special evening. None of this erases the trauma you experienced. But I hope it shows that your pain was not meaningless, that speaking up mattered, that your story is creating change. Marcus stood again, pulling his family up with him. 3 weeks ago we were victims. Tonight we're advocates. That's not a trade we would have chosen, but it's the reality we're living. We're grateful to everyone here who listened, who shared, who committed to doing better. He paused, his voice growing stronger. But let me be clear. Talk is easy. Change is hard. We'll be watching. We'll be holding people accountable, because our children deserve better. All children deserve better. And we're not going to stop fighting until they get it. The circle erupted in applause. People stood. Some approached the Mitchell family to shake their hands or offer support. Others gathered in small groups to continue conversations. The energy in the room had shifted from painful to hopeful. As people began to leave, exchanging contact information and making plans for follow-up meetings, Jennifer pulled Richardson aside. Thank you, she said simply, for believing us, for taking action, for making our pain mean something. Richardson shook his head. You're thanking me? You and your family showed more courage than I could have imagined. You turned something terrible into something powerful. That was all you? Ayanna approached with a shy smile. Mr. Richardson? You mentioned a scholarship program for students interested in hospitality. I'm not interested in hospitality, but I wondered if you knew of any scholarships for students wanting to study engineering. Richardson's face lit up. As a matter of fact, I sit on the board of a STEM scholarship foundation. We specifically support underrepresented students in science and engineering. Would you like me to send you the information? Yes, please, Ayanna said, her enthusiasm breaking through her earlier sadness. Malik tugged on Richardson's sleeve. Mr. Richardson? Can I ask you something? Of course, young man. Do you still have bad dreams about when people were mean to you when you were little? Richardson knelt down to Malik's eye level. Sometimes. But you know what helps? Doing something about it. When I feel scared or sad about those memories, I think about this restaurant and how I made it a place where everyone is welcome. That makes the bad dreams go away faster. So if I do something good, my bad dreams will stop? Maybe not right away, Richardson said gently. But eventually, and you already did something good. You were brave tonight. You told your story. That took courage. Malik thought about this and nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try to be brave. As the Mitchell family prepared to leave, Chief Santos stopped them. I know you've been through a difficult investigation process. I want you to know that we're taking this seriously. The disciplinary hearing for Officer Thornton is scheduled for next month. You'll be notified of the date and asked if you want to provide victim impact statements. We'll be there, Marcus said firmly. The drive home was quiet, but different from the drive 3 weeks ago. That night they had been silent with trauma and shock. Tonight they were silent with contemplation and cautious hope. Did tonight help? Jennifer asked her children. A little, Ayana admitted. It felt good to see people actually listening, actually caring. I'm still scared, Malik said softly, but not as much as before. Marcus reached back and squeezed his son's hand. Being scared is okay, buddy. Being scared and doing the right thing anyway? That's called courage. And you showed a lot of courage tonight. When they got home, Malik didn't immediately go to his room like he usually did. Instead, he sat with his family in the living room and they talked about the evening. About the stories they heard. About the people who apologized. About the promises that were made. Do you think things will really change? Ayana asked. I don't know, Marcus answered honestly. But I know this. Change only happens when people demand it. When people refuse to accept the status quo. When people like us speak up and people like Mr. Richardson listen, and people like that white woman who apologized recognize their role in the system. It shouldn't be our job to fix other people's racism, Ayana said with frustration. You're right, Jennifer agreed. It shouldn't be. But unfortunately it is, because if we don't fight for change, no one will. That's the unfair reality we live in. Later that night, after the children went to bed, Marcus and Jennifer sat together on their porch. The night air was cool. The stars were bright. Everything seemed peaceful. I'm proud of our kids, Jennifer said. They handled tonight beautifully. They learned that from you, Marcus replied. From us, Jennifer corrected. We're teaching them how to stand up for themselves, how to demand better. That's maybe the most important thing we'll ever teach them. Marcus pulled his wife close. Do you think Malik's nightmares will stop? Eventually. With time and love and the knowledge that we fought back, that we didn't just accept what happened, that we made it mean something. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The past 3 weeks had been exhausting. The weeks ahead would likely be challenging too. But tonight had shown them something important. They were not alone. Their pain had been heard. Their story had moved people. And maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Not because the system would fix itself, but because people like them refused to stay silent. Because allies like Richardson used their privilege and platform for good. Because even complicit people like Tim Bradley could recognize their mistakes and commit to change. It was not justice yet, but it was a start. And sometimes a start is all you need to keep fighting. 6 months had passed since that terrible night at Riverside Bistro, and the world looked different now. Not completely different, not perfectly fixed, but changed in ways both small and significant. The Mitchell family had learned that justice was not a destination you reached, but a direction you kept moving toward. Today was another important day. The community had gathered once again at Riverside Bistro, but this time for a celebration. David Richardson had transformed the weekly community conversations into something bigger. The restaurant now hosted a monthly program called Building Bridges, where people from all backgrounds came together to discuss difficult topics, share experiences, and work toward real solutions. Marcus pulled into the parking lot with his family, and this time, nobody hesitated to get out of the car. The restaurant had become familiar again, almost welcoming. The trauma of that first night had not disappeared, but it had been joined by better memories. Healing memories. Inside, the restaurant was buzzing with activity. Richardson had invited everyone involved in the past 6 months to celebrate the progress they had made together. Representatives from 20 local businesses were there, all certified as safe spaces through the program Richardson developed. Police officers who had completed the new bias training stood alongside community activists. Teachers, students, business owners, and ordinary citizens filled the space. Chief Helen Santos stood near the entrance, not in uniform this time, but in civilian clothes. She smiled when she saw the Mitchell family. Over the past months, she had become something of an ally, someone they trusted despite their initial skepticism. The Mitchell family, she greeted them warmly. "Good to see you." "Chief Santos," Marcus said, shaking her hand. "Is there any news?" She nodded. "That's actually one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today." The disciplinary board reached their final decision regarding Officer Thornton. "He's been terminated from the police force." Jennifer's eyes widened. "Terminated? Really?" "Yes. The investigation found a pattern of behavior going back years. Your case was the tipping point, but there were others. Complaints that had been ignored or minimized. We failed those people, and we failed you. Thornton is no longer a police officer, and his record will make it very difficult for him to be hired by another department." "What about criminal charges?" Ayana asked directly. Santos's expression became more serious. The district attorney decided not to pursue criminal charges. They felt the evidence, while concerning, didn't meet the threshold for prosecution. I disagreed with that decision, and I told them so. "I'm sorry." Marcus felt the familiar frustration rising but pushed it down. "So he loses his job but faces no other consequences?" "Not quite," Santos said. "There's civil liability. I've heard from my contacts that you've retained an attorney." "We have," Jennifer confirmed. "We're pursuing a civil rights lawsuit against Thornton personally and against the department for failing to address his pattern of behavior." "Good," Santos said firmly. "You should. And for what it's worth, the department won't be fighting you on this. We're prepared to settle and to use this case as a catalyst for continuing reforms." Malik, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Does this mean he can't hurt other families now?" Santos knelt down to the 13-year-old's level. "That's exactly what it means. He can't wear a badge anymore. He can't use police authority to intimidate people. You helped make that happen, Malik. You and your family." The boy smiled slightly. His nightmares had mostly stopped now, though he still had occasional bad dreams. But he was healing. They all were. Richardson approached, beaming with pride. "The guests of honor have arrived. Come, I want to show you something." He led them to a wall near the restaurant's entrance. On it hung a series of photographs and plaques. At the center was a professional photo of the Mitchell family, taken during one of the community conversation events. Above it, a plaque read, "In recognition of the Mitchell family, whose courage in speaking truth to power inspired a community to do better." Jennifer covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming in her eyes. "David, this is too much." "It's not enough," Richardson insisted. "Your story changed everything. Look around. Look at what's happened because you refused to stay silent." And indeed, the changes were visible. Tim Bradley, who had been terrified and complicit that first night, was now leading bias training sessions at businesses across the city. He had become an unlikely advocate, using his own failure as a teaching tool. He approached the Mitchell family now with a folder. "Marcus, Jennifer, I wanted to show you this," Tim said, handing them documents. "These are commitment letters from 53 businesses in the area. They've all agreed to implement the Safe Space Certification Program. We're creating a network of businesses where everyone knows they'll be treated with respect." 53? Marcus said, impressed despite himself. "And growing," Tim said proudly. "We're getting calls from other cities too. People want to replicate what we're doing here. It's spreading." James, the waiter who had been so kind that terrible night, had been promoted to assistant manager. He was training new staff on how to recognize and interrupt bias. "I never want another family to go through what you did," he told the Mitchells. "I was there, I saw it. And now I'm making sure everyone who works here knows how to do better." The elderly black couple who had offered to be witnesses that night approached with smiles. "We've lived through a lot," the man said. "Seen a lot of bad. But we're also seeing something good now. Something hopeful. Thank you for being brave enough to start this." As the celebration continued, Richardson called everyone to attention. "I want to talk about what we've accomplished together in these 6 months. First, the Safe Space Certification Program has certified 53 local businesses. Second, we've raised over $200,000 for racial justice organizations. Third, our scholarship program has awarded 5 full scholarships to students of color pursuing careers in hospitality and STEM fields. Applause filled the restaurant. But more than that, Richardson continued, we've created community. We've built relationships across racial and cultural lines. We've had difficult conversations. We've learned from each other. And we're not stopping. He turned to the Mitchell family. Ayanna, I understand you have some news to share? Ayanna stood up, looking nervous but excited. She had grown over the past 6 months, becoming more confident and vocal. I received a full scholarship to study engineering at State University, she announced. The STEM scholarship program Mr. Richardson mentioned? I'm one of the recipients. The room erupted in cheers and applause. People she barely knew were celebrating her achievement. It felt nothing like that night 6 months ago when people had stared at her family with suspicion and hostility. Thank you, Ayanna said, her voice shaking with emotion. 6 months ago, I almost gave up on my dreams. I thought maybe the world wouldn't let me be an engineer. Maybe I would always be judged by my appearance instead of my abilities. But this community showed me different. You showed me that change is possible, that people can learn, that mistakes can lead to growth. She paused, looking at her family. My parents taught me to stand up for myself, to speak up when something is wrong. And Mr. Richardson, Chief Santos, Tim, James, and everyone here taught me that when you speak up, sometimes people actually listen. Sometimes things actually change. More applause. Jennifer wiped tears from her eyes. Marcus stood beside his daughter, his arm around her shoulders, overwhelmed with pride. Malik raised his hand shyly. Can I say something too? Richardson gestured for him to speak. The room quieted. I'm 13 now, Malik started. When the bad thing happened, I was 12. I had nightmares for a long time. I was scared of police officers. I didn't want to go to restaurants. But Mom and Dad helped me be brave. And coming back here to these meetings, I learned something important. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I learned that even when bad things happen, good people can make it better. Not perfect, but better. And that's pretty cool. The simplicity of his statement moved many to tears. A 13-year-old had summarized months of difficult work in a single truth. Good people can make things better. Chief Santos stood to speak. I want to share what's changed in the police department because of what happened. We've implemented mandatory quarterly bias training for all officers. We've created a community oversight board with real power to investigate complaints. We've revised our disciplinary procedures to make it harder for problem officers to avoid accountability. We've partnered with community organizations to provide mental health resources and de-escalation training. She looked directly at the Mitchell family. Is it enough? No, is the department perfect now? Absolutely not. But we're better than we were 6 months ago, and we'll be better still 6 months from now, because you made us look in the mirror and face what we'd become. Throughout the evening, people shared their own stories of change. The white woman who had witnessed the Mitchell family's harassment and stayed silent had become an active member of a racial justice organization. She now trained other white people on how to be effective allies. The business owner who had admitted to treating black customers differently had completely revamped his store policies and trained his staff. I've lost some customers who don't like the changes, he admitted, but I've gained my integrity back. That's worth more. A local school principal talked about implementing new curriculum focused on racial literacy and justice. We're teaching children early about bias, about fairness, about standing up for others. Because children like Malik and Ayanna deserve to grow up in a better world than we inherited. Story after story, person after person, the evidence of change mounted. It was not perfect. It was not complete. But it was real. As the evening drew to a close, Richardson asked the Mitchell family to join him at the center of the room one more time. I have one final announcement, he said. In partnership with the Mitchell family, we're establishing the Ayanna Mitchell Engineering Scholarship. It will be awarded annually to a young woman of color pursuing engineering, because Ayanna's dreams matter, because representation matters, because the next generation deserves to see themselves in every profession. Ayanna burst into tears and hugged Richardson tightly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Marcus shook Richardson's hand firmly. You've turned our worst night into something meaningful, something that will help others. I don't know how to express what that means. You already expressed it, Richardson replied, by refusing to stay silent. By demanding better. By trusting me enough to be part of this journey. Jennifer addressed the crowd. 6 months ago, we left this restaurant humiliated and traumatized. We were victims of racism, of abuse of authority, of indifference. Tonight, we're standing here surrounded by people who chose to listen, to learn, to change. That doesn't erase what happened, but it redeems it. It gives our pain purpose. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. To everyone here who did the hard work of examining your own biases, of speaking up when it was uncomfortable, of committing to real change, thank you. To the businesses that certified as safe spaces, thank you. To Chief Santos and the officers working to reform the department, thank you. To Tim, who turned his failure into a catalyst for growth, thank you. Her voice grew stronger. But also remember this. Change requires constant work. This isn't finished. There will be more incidents, more families harassed, more injustices. And when those moments come, I hope you remember what happened here. I hope you remember that silence is complicity, that good intentions without action are meaningless, that real change requires courage and commitment. The room was silent, absorbing her words. Marcus added his own message. My family didn't ask to be the center of this story. We just wanted to have dinner. But sometimes life pushes you into situations where you have to choose, stay silent or speak up. We chose to speak up. And we've learned that our individual voices joined with others can actually make a difference. He looked at his children. Ayana, Malik, I'm so proud of you both. You handled something no children should have to handle with grace and strength. You've taught me that the next generation is ready to demand the world they deserve. As the event concluded, people didn't rush to leave. They stayed, continuing conversations, exchanging contact information, making plans. The relationships built over 6 months had become genuine connections. The elderly black couple spent time talking with the young white woman who was learning to be an ally. Tim Bradley sat with a group of business owners, discussing implementation strategies for their own workplaces. Chief Santos engaged in deep conversation with community activists about continued reforms. And in the middle of it all, the Mitchell family stood together, surrounded by people who had started as strangers but had become something like family, united by a terrible incident but bound together by the determination to create something better. As they finally prepared to leave, Richardson walked them to the door. You know you have a standing invitation here, right? Anytime you want to come for dinner, just call. You're family now. We might take you up on that, Marcus said with a genuine smile. But maybe next time we'll just come for the food and not save the world. Richardson laughed. Deal. In the parking lot, the Mitchell family paused before getting in their car. The night was clear and cool, stars visible above them despite the city lights. How do you feel coming back here? Jennifer asked her children. Okay, actually, Ayana said. It's not just the place where something bad happened anymore. It's also the place where something good started. I don't have nightmares anymore, Malik added. Not as much anyway. And when I do, I remember what Mr. Richardson said, that doing something good makes the bad dreams go away faster. We did something good, right? We did something very good, buddy, Marcus confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. Jennifer looked back at the restaurant glowing warm and inviting in the night. 6 months ago, I never thought I'd be able to look at this place without feeling sick. But now I feel something else. Hope, maybe, or pride, or just the satisfaction of knowing we didn't let them win. Marcus wrapped his arms around his family. We turned our pain into purpose. That's not nothing. That's everything. They drove home together, talking about Ayana's college plans, about Malik's upcoming school year, about normal family things. The trauma hadn't disappeared, but it had been joined by triumph. The hurt hadn't healed completely, but it had been transformed into something useful. At home, they ordered pizza just like they had that terrible night 6 months ago. But this time, they ate it as a family that had faced injustice and fought back. As a family that had stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. As a family that had learned their voices mattered. Marcus sat on the porch later that night looking at the stars and thinking about everything that had happened. Officer Thornton was no longer a cop. Dozens of businesses had changed their practices. Police department reforms were underway. A scholarship bore his daughter's name. Community conversations continued every month. It wasn't enough. There would be more incidents, more families hurt, more injustices to fight, but it was something. It was progress. It was proof that speaking up mattered. Jennifer joined him on the porch, handing him a cup of coffee. What are you thinking about? Just that maybe Malik was right. Good people can make things better. Not perfect, but better. And we're good people, Jennifer said softly. We're good people. Marcus agreed. They sat together in comfortable silence. Two parents who had protected their children, demanded justice and helped create change. Two people who had learned that the fight for dignity and respect was never finished but always worth fighting. Inside, Ayana was researching her future college, excited about studying engineering and becoming the person she always knew she could be. Malik was building something with his blocks, humming to himself, a normal kid doing normal kid things. The Mitchell family had survived. More than that, they had thrived. They had taken the worst night of their lives and transformed it into a catalyst for change that would ripple through their community for years to come. And somewhere across town, in other restaurants and businesses and police stations, people were learning to do better, to see better, to be better. Because one family refused to accept injustice, because one restaurant owner chose to listen, because one community decided that change was possible. It wasn't a fairy tale ending where everything became perfect, but it was something real, something honest, something that proved that ordinary people, when they come together with courage and determination, can actually make their corner of the world a little bit better. And sometimes, a little bit better is exactly what the world needs.